that you are mindful of me, that you hear me when I call. Is it true that you are thinking of me, that you love me? It's amazing. I'm a friend of God.
Father's hands, leave the rest in the Father's hands.
God is inviting us to just lay down all our burdens and all our cares into His hands. We just come to Him as children, just giving everything into His hands, trusting in His provision, knowing that He will provide. Mighty Lord, we just come to you, Lord, to give all that we are into your hands. And we just glorify you.
Hello everyone, I'm Celine, and yeah, I'm going to read John. I hope, my English is understandable enough. So, after 2 days, he went on from there into Galilee. For Jesus himself declared that a prophet has no honor in his own country. So, when he arrived in Galilee, the Galileans welcomed him, since they had seen all the things that he did in Jerusalem at the feast, for they too came to the feast. So, Jesus came again to Cana of Galilee, where he had turned the water into wine. And there was a certain royal official whose son was sick in Capernaum. Having heard that Jesus had come back from Judea to Galilee, he went to meet him and began asking him to come down and heal his son, for he was at the point of death. Then Jesus said to him, "Unless you see signs and wonders, you will not believe." The royal official pleaded with him, "Sir, do come down at once before my child dies." Jesus said to him, "Go, your son lives." The man believed what Jesus said to him and started home. As he was already going down the road, his servants met him and reported that his son was living and was healthy. So he asked them at what time he began to get better. They said, "Yesterday, during the 7th hour, the fever left him." Then the father realized that it was at that very hour when Jesus had said to him, "Your son lives." And he and his entire household believed and confidently trusted. This is the second sign that Jesus performed after he had come from Judea to Galilee.
We're talking today a bit about healing, as you heard in that story. And to talk about Jesus' ministry and neglect anything about healing is, I feel like it's incorrect. That's so much a part of what Jesus does, but that's not all he does. I believe in healings, that they happen then. I believe that healings happen now, but know that they have a purpose for what they're supposed to do and how that's supposed to work in our lives, I would say. In the reading that we have is from the Gospel of John, and John tells us his purpose for writing is that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life through his name. It's made very explicit in John chapter 20. And you see that throughout what he writes, how often these terms believe, faith, believing come up. And so that's more where I'm headed towards today. But like the word love, the word believe can have different meanings that leads to different actions. Right? Like you can have a love, like I could say I love chocolate cake and I love my children, and you can understand that those don't have the same meaning behind them. Like I don't try to preserve my chocolate cake for years and years and be like, yay, congratulations, my chocolate cake made 4 years old today, right? You don't do that just because you love chocolate cake, yet loving my children, I would do that. I would not die for my chocolate cake. No, I would for my children. And yet, conversely, because I love chocolate cake, I eat chocolate cake. You would be quite appalled and disagree with my understanding of love if that's how I treated my children, right? So you can say love, but it can mean different things and have different actions of what goes with it. So then when Jesus says, the greatest commandment is love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and the second is like it, love your neighbor as yourself, he can say, well, this is the love I'm looking for, or that's not the type of love I'm looking for. Love God in a different way than you love chocolate cake. The same is true with the word believe, that you can have someone that says, I believe in something, and it can have different degrees or different sort of gradations of meaning, of how far they're willing to trust that thing. And Jesus has the right to say whether that is or is not the kind of belief he's looking for. So we'll look at some of these different ideas of belief as we look through this story of how that went, of a belief that then led to a stronger belief, that Jesus was going for the deeper belief. Now, allow me to a little bit nerd out biblically here, because we're told in the reading you saw, like this was the second sign that Jesus did when he was in Cana, and for John, including these signs is an important part of how he wrote his gospel. So I want you to see a little bit of how that works. He writes several times mentioning things that are a sign, and then often has the response people had afterwards, saying the sign led to greater belief in Jesus, or sometimes the sign led to rejection of Jesus. And various scholars will count them differently and number them differently, but I think that this is probably a fair way of looking at how John did it, where there are 7 signs that Jesus gives that John includes. Because John says, if I could write all of the things Jesus did, it would fill up more books than would be possible. He talks about there's so many signs, so many wonders, so John specifically chose certain ones for certain purposes. And part of it is because he had this nice poetic structure going on. So this is something that I think is cool. There's these 7 signs, and he does it in what can be called a prophetic ring, rhetorical template by some. You see how the first, the fourth, and the 7th signs all sort of connect. The first sign, Jesus changes water into wine. Jesus provides, I actually should have said wine, not water. There's the water there, and he provides the wine at this wedding. And the 4th one, Jesus provides bread and feeding the 5,000. And then the final one, Jesus provides himself. And for those that realize we're going to take communion soon, you'll notice that bread and wine are included in this remembering of Jesus' death. So Jesus provides himself, connects with Jesus providing wine and Jesus providing bread. The 2nd and the 6th one are very similar. We're going to look at the 2nd one today more so, but Jesus raises an almost dead family member, and the 6th one is Lazarus. Jesus raises a dead family member back to life. And then the 3rd and the 5th one parallel each other as well, that Jesus heals someone on the Sabbath. So there's this parallelism in the whole book of John. I think it's cool. So John, even just in that, the Holy Spirit had inspired him to write it in a very specific way, and the one we're looking at today is the 2nd one of these. How much will that be important? We'll see. But Jesus heals this official's mostly dead son. In John chapter 3 and John chapter 4, what we looked at over the last few weeks, Jesus has had these conversations with people about eternal life and what it means to have that life and how that life it comes from Jesus. So it doesn't surprise us so much that then Jesus providing life is something that shows up right afterward. But he had been in Samaria. These people, after he's had this conversation about eternal life with the woman at the well, then the whole village now wants to come out and see Jesus, talks to him, says, hey, stay with us. He did that for 2 days. And then he says, okay, I've shared what I need to share with you. Moving on. Going up to the area of Galilee, which is where Jesus grew up in the city of Nazareth. And that we'll look at more next week, where Jesus goes to Nazareth and isn't received well. But today, what we're looking at, he was received well. In Galilee, we're told that people had seen his miraculous signs back in Jerusalem, back with the temple. That was back in December, I think we talked about it. And people had seen these signs and they're like, wow, Jesus is so cool. Jesus does cool stuff. Jesus, he does like miraculous things. Wow, so good. And so the people had seen these because they were there for the big celebration in Jerusalem, and then they all went back to their home. So now it's like, oh, the movie star is coming to us. He's not just staying in Jerusalem, the capital, but like coming to our little like outpost area. Because Galilee was not as densely populated, it was just not as important in some ways at that time from how the world outside saw. But Jesus didn't come to just talk to large crowds. He came to talk to people individually. We see Jesus trying to do that and not always getting that chance. He wants to have like closer connection so often, and then you get these crowds, and he's like, how do I deal with this crowd in the best way to care for each individual? So know that Jesus is not someone who likes to just have a crowd of people that get lost in the crowd. He really enjoys, Jesus' heart is for individuals as well as building a community in a healthy way. So people are spreading the news. Man, Jesus is here. Or Jesus is in our area. Wow, good stuff. Jesus does miracles. And we're told this official. We're not really told much more about this official, apart from he's an official, and he's got a kid. We don't know if this is a Roman official or a Jewish official, very possibly Jewish, that would have served in Herod Antipas's government, because the Jews under Herod were allowed to have a little more autonomy up in Galilee than in Jerusalem, where Rome had strong control. So we're not told exactly anything else about this guy except he's an official and his son is near death. And he's living in Capernaum and heads to Canaan. Now today, if you were going to make that walk, it would be more than a 7-hour walk. At least according to Google. My guess is roads have got a little better now than they used to be, and paths to go. So assume this was going to take at least 7, if not more, hours to get from one to the other. We don't know if he was walking or if he was by donkey or by horse or what. Horse might have been less likely, I think. So this is a man who likely woke up, like he knew he wanted to go. He waited for the sun to just start coming up and went, okay, I'm hitting the road and I'm going to go find Jesus because I think that this guy can heal my kid. And so he goes hours and hours to try to get there. Maybe they were just more used to it in that time. I mean, when was the last time any of you walked for 7 hours in a day? Do you remember it? I did like the day before Easter, I think 4 years ago now or something, when our church did the Spencer March and the Kennedy March. I've done it like 3 times in my life. That's about it. So they're memorable. This isn't a thing that you do every day, like let's just do a 7-hour walk for the fun of it through like difficult terrain. But this man, he's going and trying to find Jesus, and And the least has found Jesus by what they said is the 7th hour, which at that time would have been about 1 o'clock in the afternoon. That they started counting the hours from when like the sun came up, which would be around 6. So it's like, oh, 7 hours later, Jesus has found this guy, or this man has found Jesus in about the middle of the day when it's hot, but he traveled because this kid was worth that. And he's begging Jesus, come with me and heal my kid. Please, Jesus, come heal my child. And you'd think a dad begging you would cause a different reaction out of Jesus. And sometimes I just don't fully understand how he starts. But this was Jesus' response. Will you never believe in me unless you see miraculous signs and wonders? The word you there was translated well on the version we had on the screen. It's plural. So it's like, well, you all. And Jesus seems to be talking not just to the dad here, but like a crowd or more people. And I guess to hit on that, as we see Jesus throughout all 4 of the Gospels, but especially in John, it's like, do people believe in him? Do they not? How do they respond to it? And it's amazing how humans are. We sometimes think, oh man, if I saw miracles, I would believe. And I've heard that in worship songs, I've heard that in sermons, I've heard that in conversations of like, oh man, the more stuff you see, the more connected you'll be to Jesus. And when I read through the Bible, I just don't see that. And when I see the lives of people around me, it doesn't always ring true. There are people who saw miracles and saw God do amazing things that had such short-term memory. And then instead chose afterward like, that was great, but what have you done for me lately? Nothing. Maybe even the stuff in the past wasn't real. I don't really remember that well. I'm going to do my own thing. Never underestimate the ability of humanity to be self-focused and selfish. And so Jesus rightly asks, like, will you never believe unless you see it? And even if you do, will you actually change your lives? Because Jesus, he's saying this in Cana, and later, Jesus is recorded in Matthew 11, like he talks about all these areas where he did most of his ministry, Capernaum, Cana, and some of those. And he says, woe to you, Chorazin, and woe to you, Capernaum, because if all the miracles that had been done in you had been done in some of these other places, they would have repented already. They would have changed their lives around. But you saw miracles and just went, cool. But changed nothing. And when we read about the Pharisees and how some of that goes in their interactions, they admit Jesus did signs. The most mind-boggling verses to me is when Jesus has raised Lazarus from the dead, which is number 6 of the signs. It comes later in the story, but I think Jesus understands people well enough by number 2 that it makes sense it happens at number 6. Jesus has raised Lazarus from the dead. No one's disputing that. But the Pharisees are like, man, if Jesus keeps doing all these sorts of things, lots of people are going to follow him. We need to kill Jesus and to kill Lazarus. He was just dead, and he came back to life. Like, we just got to kill him off again. It's so like, instead of going, wow, something amazing has happened, maybe you should reconsider how you judged Jesus. They just are stuck in, nope, we're against him. He's wrong. And so I know that continues to happen today. I've had friends that have had healings in their life that aren't then still going 100% for Jesus. Now that's not like, oh, if you have a miracle, well, then you're going to fall away. That's not what I'm saying by any means. I know people who have seen miracles that follow Jesus wholeheartedly still. But don't think that that will be the kind of belief that Jesus is looking for, is just the belief that sees one miracle in your life. So Jesus asked, like, well, you all never believe unless you see a miracle. And it's interesting to me as I thought, I also still don't get this, why Jesus seems to say some of the hardest things when it's a parent asking for their kid. Like with here, like, Jesus, I'm begging you, come heal my child. Will you all never believe if I don't do something? There's another dad who comes up, he's like, Jesus, cast this demon out of my child. He's like, man, how long do I have to put up with all of you? A mom comes up and like, would you come heal my child? He's like, yeah, let me work with these other people while I'll get to you later kind of thing. Like Jesus, sometimes with parents, I don't know if it's just like pushing them a little harder to see how much they're willing to continue seeking and believing that he'll be good even if they're put off. But Jesus seems to do that. Maybe it's like a sports coach that pushes the talented ones even harder just because he knows that they can show more faith or something. Jesus says this, and the dad is unscathed. He continues, Jesus, no really, please come with me and heal my child. And Jesus responds, you can go home. Your son will live. That was not, the dad was asking like, come with me, come with me. Jesus says, I don't need to go with you. But apparently the dad's able to accept it pretty quick. He goes, I'll take you at your word. And he starts heading home. He believed. This is a good thing. Jesus is like, will you all ever believe unless you see it? He's like, okay, I'll believe. And I'll start on my way back. So the dad, he does start heading home. We're not told all the particulars in between, but when he finally runs into some servants, they're talking about it like it was the day before. Which makes some sense. Because Dad probably got up really early in the morning to get as far as he could so that he could find Jesus. On the way back, it might have been late enough that it's starting to get too dark. Not everybody has like headlights on their cars in like 27 AD kind of thing. So you didn't travel around, especially after dark so much, because he's on roads where it's easy to have people that are going to come up and try to rob you or attack you. You have those stories. Jesus even tells the one of the Good Samaritan includes some guy who gets beat up on the road, and that's not a strange thing. Add to it that this is an official who might be more likely to have money, and he's all the more a target. So the dad starts heading home, but isn't able to make it the whole way that night, so he stops over somewhere, and then the next morning he gets up, heading home. The servants are sent out early in the morning, and they run into each other. Your son's okay. Your son's okay. And he asks, well, when did that happen? Oh, it was around the 7th hour yesterday. It was at like 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And he realizes that was when Jesus said it. That was it. It did. It worked. And we're told he and all of his family believed. So he had believed, but then now it seems like he's believing again. And it seems like maybe it's that like degree of faith, like that extra step of belief of he believed and his actions showed it. He started going home. But then the more that he started walking in faith, the more he started to see answers in faith, and so he believed even further, and his whole family with him. This is a pretty cool story. It's a pretty incredible thing to happen. And showed that, like, The authority of Jesus isn't stuck by space. It's not determined by how close you can get. And so, for whatever that says for us living in a Corona time frame where we all have to be distanced and going, God's not thrown off by a 7-hour walk, much less a 1.5 meter distance. But there's a healing that's amazing, and we're told it was a sign. It was a second sign that Jesus did, and people believed in him. How did we ever get told this story? How did John ever hear the rest of this? It's possible that John was there with Jesus when Jesus says to the man, hey, go home, your kid's okay. So John heard that firsthand account, probably, possibly. John didn't walk with him back. How'd they find out? This man had to tell his testimony at some point. And Jesus traveled around. He would have been in Capernaum later. It's very possible. This man runs up to Jesus. Hey, I don't know if you remember me, but I went all the way to Canaan to find you. And then you sent me home. And that was like at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And then I found out my kid got better at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Like, this story had to get passed on. An important thing, if you ever have a healing or a miracle or something done in your life, share the story. It's part of what we talked about the last week especially. Share your story, share your testimony, share what Jesus has done in your life. His dad apparently believed in such a way that he would pass that on. And after communion, actually, we'll have that chance. If people want to share some testimonies, you'll be able to do that later. So maybe think of something. What's Jesus been doing in your life? But that question of like, man, how did they know? Okay, they must have been told later about it. But it's also interesting to me, why did John choose this as a second sign when he says like, oh, this was the second sign Jesus did? Because he said, well, Jesus had been doing these miracles and signs and all the people of Galilee had seen it. The signs that John chooses are often not the big public ones. The wedding in Cana, like people end up tasting the miracle that happened, but it seems like a lot of them don't even know how this wine came around. Like it's only a few people who were there that saw and heard. And that was the first sign. The second one, even less people are getting to see both parts of it. In fact, there's no one who sees both parts of it at the same time. They have to assemble it together later. There's the few that hear Jesus talk to the dad, and then there's the servants way back at home. But like the next day, the only people who are finding this out are dad and his servants and then his family. It throws a wrench in my mentality of the most important things are the ones that everybody gets to see. Instead, these important signs that John chooses are the ones where it requires a faith that doesn't get to see it yet, but then does. A walking by faith and not by sight. So it totally makes sense later, I'm giving away like the end of John, that includes a time where after Jesus has died and resurrected, and one of the most incredible things about the resurrection is that like no one saw it. They saw what came out afterward. They saw the risen Jesus who was real, but we don't hear of anyone who actually sees Jesus walk out of the tomb or take his first breath or any of that. It's like this strange, hidden, like most incredible moment of history, and none of the gospel writers were actually there to see it. Wow. Which caused people to be like, I don't know if it really happened, including one of Jesus' disciples, Thomas, who's like, I don't know if I believe it. I'll believe it if I see Jesus and I'm able to like touch the scars he had. Jesus then shows up and was like, hey, touch the scars. Go for it. You've seen and you've believed, but blessed are those who have not seen, yet believed. And that story is one that's been played out throughout the Gospel of John, and honestly played out so often throughout history, I think, that continues to happen in our lives. That sometimes we get to be those blessed who see it and believe it. But the kind of belief Jesus is looking for is those who will believe him even when they don't see it, even before they see it. And that was part of what was, I guess, so incredible to me about earlier in John chapter 4, when you have these Samaritans who don't see a single miracle, but they trust in Jesus the Messiah. They know that he's the one just because of conversations, just because of his words. So I guess, what about you? Will you take Jesus at his words? Will you believe him even in times where you don't see what's the good outcome that he wants to give? Because I do believe that so firmly, is that God's desire is to do good to the humanity that he created. But will we believe him, will we trust him, and will we walk in it? Will we walk toward it even at times when we don't see it? Just like that dad's like, I'll take you at your word, I'll start going home. And some of that includes just getting to know Jesus better and knowing his words. And so that's why we've been going through what I call the Jesus Life Challenge this year. It has like, hey, we're reading these Gospels and asking these sorts of questions like, Jesus, why'd you do this? Because I want to be like you. And listening to, teaching on it, talking with other people about it, and trying to find ways to put it into practice. So each week I try to give you some kind of practical point. The last few weeks have been to talk to other people, and I know that that's not always the favorite things for some people, is being talkative. So this week I gave you a non-talkative option, or at least not talking to other people. And it was to journal and pray about something that you're wanting to see in your life. Something that kind of thing that you would walk 7 hours to ask Jesus to do for you. What's something in your life that you're waiting for and longing for? Pray about it, write it down. That helps for a lot of people. Writing makes it stick, it's more memorable. Maybe even write down like when you take the date and time of it. So who knows, maybe you'll run into people later, they're like, is it this exact time? You'd be like, like the dad did. But take that time to kind of go to Jesus and ask him this. And then start walking toward whatever that is. And that doesn't have to be walking in a physical sense. It can look different depending upon what your thing is. But to be like that dad, okay, I've talked to Jesus, I'll take him at his word, and now I'm going to start going toward what I still have to do, like going in some ways on with the rest of my life, leaving that in Jesus' hands. So in a moment, Christine is going to come up and share a little bit about communion before we take it. But as we come to this time, realize what Jesus has already done and trust that he's going to continue working in your life. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we want to put kind of all sorts of belief in Jesus, not just a belief for temporary things, or not just a belief for making sure we have enough food on our table today, but we want to put our lives into your hands and trust that you're good and that you're going to guide us and use us to be a blessing to others as well, and to have a story that we can tell others about who you are. So may we continue to put our faith into practice. May we see you do amazing things. God, for those that have been waiting for answers to things for a long time, I pray that they'd be blessed for their patience, they'd be blessed for believing even when they haven't seen it, but that also they'd be able to see it and testify to your goodness. Thank you for loving us so much. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Good morning, everyone. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Christine, and we're going to take communion together. And yeah, as I was preparing for communion this morning, I just got thinking about hope, which connects well, I think, with what we've been hearing about praying and believing for things that have still come to pass. And yeah, also just living in the middle of a COVID pandemic, I think all of us can connect with, I don't know, the need for hope. In my workplace, I think I see there's just a lot of uncertainty, like a fear of suffering. But ultimately, I think for some people, just no hope. And it just got me thinking about how we as Christians are called to be children of hope. Like we can be filled with hope even in the face of uncertainty and feeling afraid sometimes. And I loved how we sang, I'm a friend of God. And I think it's good to reflect on that as we are about to take communion, that through Jesus' sacrifice, we have become friends with God and we can be filled with hope. And filled with, just the knowledge that He's with us, whatever happens in our life. And I want to read two portions of the Bible. So the first portion that I want to read will be in Isaiah 53, which is a part of what some people call the suffering servant. So I'll read just the first part of the chapter, starting at verse 1. Who has believed our message, and to whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed? He grew up before Him like a tender shoot, and like a root out of dry ground. He had no beauty or majesty to attract us to Him, nothing in His appearance that we should desire Him. He was despised and rejected by men, a man of sorrows and familiar with suffering, like one from whom men hide their faces. He was despised, and we esteemed Him not. Surely He took up our infirmities and carried our sorrows. Yet we considered Him stricken by God, smitten by Him and afflicted. But He was pierced for our transgressions, He was crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that brought us peace was upon Him, and by His wounds we are healed. We all like sheep have gone astray, each of us has turned to his own way, and the Lord has laid on Him the iniquity of us all. So as we think about communion, may we think about that Jesus was pierced for us. May we be filled with hope, whatever we're facing, whatever our circumstances are. The second part that I want to read is from 1 Corinthians chapter 11, starting at verse 23. The Lord Jesus, on the night He was betrayed, took bread, and when He had given thanks, He broke it and said, "This is my body, which is for you. Do this in remembrance of me." In the same way, after supper, He took the cup, saying, "This cup is the new covenant in my blood. Do this whenever you drink it in remembrance of me. For whenever you eat this bread and drink this cup, you proclaim the Lord's death until He comes." So again, may we be filled with hope as we take communion, and also filled in the hope that Jesus will come again, and filled with a hope that is not just a hope for this life, but is a hope for the life to come after we die.
Where else would I rather be than sitting here at your feet? I pour out every ounce, all that is within me. Jesus, I will worship you. I am here to worship you. In your presence I receive every gift you have for me. So I give my all to you. You know the depth of my sin, yet you invite me to drink. You pour out healing love, eternal life flows in me. Jesus, I will worship you. I am here to worship you. Not deserving of your touch, still you choose to fill my cup. So I give my all to you. You died a merciless death, emptied yourself with each breath. You poured out every ounce. Your sacrifice has saved me. Jesus, I will worship you. I am here to worship you. If I give my heart and soul, it's just a fraction of what's on. So I give my all to you, Jesus, I will worship you. I am here to worship you. In your presence I receive every gift you have for me. So I give my all to you, Jesus, I will worship you. I am here to worship you. Not deserving of your touch, still you choose to fill my cup. So I give my all to you. Jesus, I will worship you. I am here to worship you. If I give my heart and soul, it's just a fraction of what's on. So I give my all to you.
Praise the Lord, like I always say. And I think I wasn't ready to give any God story, but I think there's something God does in our life that we always have to be grateful for. So I was like waiting till nobody wanted to share. I thought I should just share something. And the message this morning was also about healing. So I want to thank God that He healed me in a specific way. I used to play football some years ago, but when I got to Belgium, I played a couple of years, I think 2008 through 2012. So I had a problem with my right knee. At a point, I had to go for a meniscus operation, so that got healed. But like since for a year now, I started also feeling pains on my left knees. Sometimes it was actually difficult for me to walk, or when I have to climb the staircase, that was very difficult. But because sometimes at work, I don't want to take the lift, I'd rather take the staircase just to kind of help movement of the body. So the pain was really becoming excruciating, but I didn't want to go to the doctor because I thought if I go, they might ask me to go for an operation. So last week, when we had the all-night prayer meeting, so I asked the prayer group to pray for my knees that it's really becoming very, very painful. So they prayed, and prior to that, I've also been praying, but since last week, the leg has really, the swelling went down, and I can walk more properly with it. I can put pains on it, and I'm still believing God that I don't want to go to the hospital. I don't want to have a second operation on my knees. So I just wanted to thank God that He's faithful. He's our healer. And just like Pastor Mark preached this morning, sometimes we always wait for God to do big things in our life, mostly attached to material things. But there are so many things that God does for us that we should be grateful for. So I just want to thank Him for healing my needs, and like He said, calling the things that are known as though they were. Even though I still feel pain, but in my heart, I believe that I have been healed. And also coming to testify of it this morning, I just want us to believe and encourage us from the sermon that God is a healer. He's our Jehovah Rapha, the God that heals, and He will always heal every areas of our lives. Thank you. That's what I want to share.
How you guys doing? So yesterday, I had a call from I say friend, but she was like a mother figure. I had, I think it was beginning of 2020, the Army, they hired contractors who come and be therapists, I guess. If anybody needs to just talk and stuff like that. In 2020, a lady named Patricia came from the States, and we had hit it off, not just a counselor, but you began to see this new relationship grow. She helped me out with a lot. It was an interesting time I was going through. And just being there for me, helping me work through things that's how my past, work through things that's currently going on, that was currently going on. And we developed a great relationship. She's a believer as well. So that truly helped. I was like, man, I got a counselor who's also a believer too, man, this is great. So we not only talked about things that's happening here, but also spiritual things and what God is doing. But yesterday she gave me a call from the hospital, and she told me that, I think it was 2 weeks ago, me and Denagi talked to her, and the day after that, she got put in the hospital. Apparently something in her stomach burst, and she got infection in the blood, kidney is totally shut down. She even flatlined and passed away, and came back. And so she called and told me all that happened in a 2 week span. And I was just so grateful and thankful that God, kept her here. And she's still in good spirits. She says, while she's gone, God showed her some things and talked to her. So it's good to know that God has a purpose for her. He even talks about, there's still things that she wants to tell me and talk with me about. There's some things that, she says that God has for me to do, and she wants me to help with that. So to see her go through something, go from healthy one day to fighting for your life one day, and now she's being able to talk and she's recovering. So I thank God for that. But still keep her in prayers that her body may recover, that her kidneys may recover, so she won't have to be on dialysis for too long. So, but I'm thankful that she's still here. I would have a lot of grief if she would pass away, but she is really close to me. So thank God for that.
My name is Anneke, and I want to make a story about innerly healing. It takes a long time when I met God in my life, really God in my life. I was already 45, and in that 45 years I was surviving more. I did not know, but it happened. And when I met him, I knew immediately, okay, this is it. My life changed 180 degrees, I always say. I knew that's where I'm looking for my whole life. And after that time, when I realized that, he was really healing me. I was going to church, a little church, and I was crying for 3 years. He was moving the walls around my heart. And I changed. When people know me from before and now they know. And I know by myself the best that I changed. So that's a big, big miracle in my life. That I learned to trust on God. To know who He is and that He's changing me. He's changing me every day. And I know that He wants me and to trust Him. And when situations happened, it took years that I was panicking. I did not know how to trust. I did not know. I leave it all that years before I met Him. But now I learn more and more to trust on Him. When situations happened, I know, okay, no panic, you can trust on Him. And this not always going, but I knew it's going better and better. And God has a plan with me, and God has a plan with all of us. And I learned from, okay, but when you trust me, then I can fulfill my plan. When you are not trusting me, I can do nothing. And that I learned. So I'm doing it, and I hope that I can encourage you. But God is always with us, and God has a plan with us. Thank you.
So I'm Celine, and I really trust God, and I believe in miracles. I come from a modest family. Which had no educational background, and nobody really believed in me. For example, I never was able to. I mean, I had a lot of hardships in my life, a lot of failures. Some teacher believed maybe that I could, become, I don't know, like kind of Putzfrau, like a cleaning woman. I decided just to fight and to believe that something different could be happen in my life. And this year, it was just so crazy because, I was admitted at United Nations University in Maastricht, and for me it was just unbelievable until it's happened. And so I think it's very important, never give up. If you really believe in something, it could happen. And I'm very, very thankful for this. And I really encourage you to follow your dreams and to trust God no matter what happens in your life. Thank you.